Often it's the same one happening. You aren't coming up with the outcome.
All right, excellent. I'm sorry about that mix up. Um, I'm still trying to work around to investigate why that happened. Please, if you can hear me, I'd like to just confirm if you can hear me, please. Uh, Sorry about that mix up earlier. Again, I'm trying to see how we can have a smooth sail this time. Okay, so okay, I have my sound engineers. We'll say it's functional. Uh, we're just going to give a few minutes so everyone can rejoin rejoin the conversation. Um, Trying to just quickly so help to share that to as many persons as so. So have that shared. Great, great. Have a list coming up. Have a list coming up. Have a list coming up. Okay, so sorry again about that. Let's just jump right into it again. So here we're looking at the filter. We're trying to set a filter, and I said I would want to set it to here, and we had just done this, and we're going to get back into it later on. Okay. Now, I also wanted to check to see metric, and I was trying to look back on the data source, see the columns as we have them here to be sure of what they represent. So I have, so what we have here is, have, let's see, name, the athlete's name, the gender, the team. So I'm going to try to work with the team name. Okay. Now, one interesting thing about BI Visual is, in as much as you can select, the visual element that you want, and then you get to see its preferred input. Okay. Now, what happens if you do not do that? Okay, and instead you just arbitrarily drag a field, you know, columns. These terms are used interchangeably. They mean the same thing. It just happens to be in whatever the domain that you're operating in. That's where it kind of like has this nuances, but they mean the same thing. So what just happens when I drag this name field in here? Okay, what happens that it just immediately displays, it gives me a table visual. Okay, it gives me a table visual, and the name field is for the names of the athletes. I don't want that, so I'm just going to take this off. Instead, I'm going to go with team. Okay, so let me select team here. Okay, so for the team seems to be representing the countries. Excellent, the countries. Okay, so it's representing the countries and it's in a table. Now I'm just going to delete this. Okay, I'm going to just simply remove this. I want the countries to be unique. That's what I want. That's what I want displayed here. And we have two kinds of tables. So we have this normal table as it is. A table which has rows, and columns. And then we have in the Power BI the metrics. It's a table. If you're quite familiar with the Excel, even if you're not, it's fine. Okay, but if you're familiar with Excel, you can think of it as the pivot table. Okay, the pivot table, what the pivot table does, that's what you just have here. What the pivot table does is what you have here in this with the metrics visual. Okay, so I'm going to select the metrics, right? So have it selected in here, and then I'm going to select the theme. So it has what you want for rows and for columns. So for the rows, I'm going to drag the theme over. Okay, so let's just increase the width arbitrarily for this. Okay, it's still not as much as I want. And then for the columns, we can specify something we want for the columns. But in terms of values, what I want is I want to know how I have not touched on is you can see this symbol, just a few columns. Okay, it's if you recall from statistics, it represents that a particular operation, like you could say an arithmetic operation or a statistical operation, is taking place. Now that's something that in Power BI, like I'm trying to think of a simple term, but of a simpler term, I'm just going to say as this. Okay, an aggregate is being taking place. An aggregate operation. So think of it like aggregating data, aggregating something is like you're trying to deal with it at a bigger level, like you're expressing it at a bigger level. Now, in terms of data, there are some common aggregate expressions in data generally. One of such is saying you're counting how many of these do you have. You could have things like the average, um, the largest, max, and then the contracts mean, and quite a number of them that exist. But for here, I'm just going to drag this ID, right, which supposed to mean that for each athlete. Okay, and I'm going to drag it to the value fields here for it to display the count of IDs. Now, from what I can see here as teams, okay, and then it seems to be arranged in alphabetical order. Okay, in alphabetical order, and but I can see some duplicates. They are not clear duplicates. Like we have this Amulet 3, Amulet 7. What could it mean? So that's something that when we revisit this data, so we have Argentina, so we're saying that you really have duplicate information in here. So when we get into the bit of cleaning the data, we're going to also get into that. But still, I'm also going to reduce this so I can have space for more elements in my data set, and I can also edit this column header here. Well, by double clicking, I just barely change the sorting order. If you want to keep it from this team bit, you can but I can come here to edit. Now, this is not all that I want. So for now, I'm just going to remove this and focus on something that I think is more realistic. And entry point, for this information that you want to share. And I think one of such things would be to display the total count. Total count. So think of it, you want to show the total count of something. It should just be like a board. Already here we're dealing with a we're not dealing with a board. Think of this as a canvas. Okay, so in your canvas, you have different things that you're putting in there. So here now, just like you want to show a particular statistic, like a number to express something. I think it should be a board. And luckily, the Power BI has a visualization tool that can do just that. So it's called cards, right? So we have this card, and then we also have this multi-row card. You get to see where it comes in, a typical case to use a simple card or a multi-row card, you know, or even, we have the new one, new card. So let's just work with the normal, like the old card, depending on your version of Power BI installed on your computer. Perhaps this would be what you're seeing. So we're just going to stick with it. So I'm just going to select the card. Now, what is the asking for here? If we look at add data fields here, so I'm just going to add just one. Now, I think the IDs would be a unique means of identifying athletes. No two athletes should have same ID. That's my thinking. Okay, so I'm just going to drag this in here, and it says count. All right, so you can see count. So it tries to give this expression to say 271.12k. So k is an expression of 1,000. Okay, now we're going to do some formatting on this particular visual. So I'm going to just pull this up here. Okay, I'm going to pull this up here. Now we've been looking at just this first what I call it, like if I was to use a marker to just draw on my screen, I would just simply draw around this. This is what we've been looking at, and then we've also been just taking columns here. We've not been paying too much attention to this, even though when you select this, I will implore you to practice as you're rewatching the video, that you get to see different interactions. So here you're seeing fields. When we're dealing with table-like visuals, you're seeing like, oh, what rows, what columns, and then the values that you want in there. So all along this while, this is what has been selected, the visual build here, this visual build here. We can do some bits of formatting. Now from this arrow here, if you just click on this drop down, you have different things that are expressed here. Show value as days, new quick measure, and all of that. So what we have by default is the count, right? Which is like it's taking it 1, 2, 3. So that's what it expresses. So these are just aggregate things I was trying to refer to, common aggregate things I was trying to refer to. If you want to perform a new one, measures, if you just say new quick measure, we're going to get into that later on. So let's just take it, like incremental steps, these baby steps to progress, to build more on it. Now, what I want to get here is rename for this visual. I don't want count of ID to be what is displayed here. So what do I want? I can say athletes, right? You can just say athletes in here. Now, if I arbitrary on its own, perhaps we want to add a little bit of finesse to it, So I'm just going to select that particular visual, and then on this bit here, I have format. As we progress, we'll get more on that. Format your visuals, where we're just going to try to focus on. So clicking on format your visual, we have visual bit, we have general. So here, typically I try to implore people to just, would I use the word play with it? Okay, but since you're dealing with serious business, I'll say try your hands on it. You can't really go wrong. The only thing I'll just implore you to do is make sure that whatever you're doing, you can easily retrace your steps. It's like using the undo action. And so common things, you have text wrap, you have source spacing. Text wrap, what text wrap entails, let's use the word wrap. When you have a gift, you want to get someone a gift, you just don't want to put it out there. You want to put it in a gift wrapper, right? So that gift basically, under normal assumptions, is that it must be contained, it must be covered wholly by the gift wrapper. So now when you think of a text wrap, is that you're saying whatever the content of that text is, it should be wrapped within um, the provision you've made for it. So it shouldn't spill, but just as you have your screen, which you're using to see me now, you're watching this. Uh, Imagine I have like my hand now moving off the screen, and now you can't see my hand off the screen. If it was something that was really important for you to see, you would like for my hand not to go beyond the coverage of the camera, right? So that's like wrapping. So same way like text. So your text, the content spill. So you say text wrap. So you can have that turned on or turned off. Now this here now toggling it on and off does not really show any material change to the visual. Everything just seems to be small enough for this space. Okay, but perhaps when you're working with other data sets or or other content, perhaps the text that you've selected as the label there is really long. Do you want it to spill out, or you want it to just spill downwards, like to form another line? So here we can also do things regarding the font. You can make it bold, you know, or you can just unbold it to leave it as is. Now using making it bold, the colors, all these are subjective in terms of like what do you want? Is this an information that you think should stand out to the audience, to the person that is going to be viewing this report? If that's the case, then you would want to do things to make it pop, right? Make it pop. Let's just use that word to make it pop. Um, Now I'm just going to move out of visual and then come to this general bit here. Now this general bit here, it gets more interesting. If you want more things, you could have titles. I'm just going to come down to properties first. Okay, so properties, the height, which by dragging we can adjust, or if you have particular dimensions in mind, as your expertise and familiarization with the application grows, you would easily be able to also get some of these um, figures and values ready for yourself. Okay, we have position, padding. These are advanced. Yes, it's saying advanced options, but even the positioning and padding, I'll just say try to stick for now with merely dragging and dropping. Okay, as you progress, in terms of familiarization with the tool, then you can go ahead to do more things around it. Okay, so now effects, background, this is somewhere you can easily jump in on. By default, the color is just set to white, and the color of, I call this a canvas. So we're kind of like artists. We just have canvas and we're painting, and these different visuals, are like different points in our canvas. So what do we want to highlight? What do we want the internet audience to focus on, for it to get their attention? So if the entire background is white, perhaps we want to just select a different color. So there's this color palette here which you can select from. Now I'm just going to play with this and just select one here. And you see the color is changed. Now if you have, perhaps this does not satisfy your color interest, you could come here and how to play around with it. Okay, you can come to just play around with it. As you can see that as you apply stuff, it's changing. You're seeing it changing here. Now if you also have some form of experience with designs, you can see that there are color codes. Now observe what happens as I drag. You see these values here, they are also changing. Okay, so you have hex codes, which are preceded by a pound sign or a hash symbol, and then you have RGB values. If perhaps you already have, there are some platforms where you already have this numbers, these collections here, you can just come in and paste it in. There are some very popular sites that help with color combination. If perhaps you're like me, who is not very good with selecting the right colors, you could just leverage on these other platforms to help you with what a color that perhaps would just suit your own taste, all right, your own taste. So having done that, it has this different thing. But then one of the things I know I can easily touch on is to say that, hey, you know what, I'm going to jump back to the font color. Okay, the font color, the 271 and all of that. In as much as I want it, but I do not want it in black. Okay, I definitely want it to be white, so it has this, so here is distinct, and then it's still, you know giving this vibe which better suited with. Okay, the category label, I'm also going to change that, perhaps to a little bit of white. I'm going to make that bold. If you want to underline that, you can, if you want to. Okay, now we need to come out of that. Where we got to was with the background. Okay, you can do with the background, to play with the background. You can increase that transparency level. You can add borders to it. Excuse me excuse me you can have borders to it. Now I'm going to actually have a border to this. I'm going to have a border to this, but I don't really want a color. Okay, so I'm just going to temporarily just select the current color of this canvas here. Now, why I want the border, my interest of the border is because of the rounded corners. Okay, so the card by default has this sharp edges. Okay, so now just for aesthetics, you can perhaps want to say, hey, I want rounded corners here. Now, if I click on this, click outside the area, you can see that it has the edges are quite different. If I just click toggle, so we can appreciate it more. Okay, where we effects, and then under the border, right under the border, so the rounded corners, I'm going to just take it a bit more. If you as you get more familiar with it, you get more familiar with the whole tool, you also would see um certain things, appreciate certain things more. Now look, you see that it's different from like a typical just box. It's not just like typical box in there. Now with this, yeah, it's slowly coming, or like, or slowly beating it into shape, right? Slowly beating it into shape, slowly beating it into shape. I'll have our years here. Now what happens with, well, this is a slicer, like a filter point. Okay, so now what happens when I drag this? I want you to focus on the card. Okay, to focus on the card, and I click out of the area, you see that the value, right, is changing. Okay, and I'm going to just say, so this 1951, perhaps I can just, it allows me to type in here. I'm just going to say from 2000, right, from the year 2000. And you see we have, so you see how the values are changing. Okay, now this is cross, we're using a slicer. Okay, we're using a slicer, and I'm just going to click on this to clear selection. So we have this selected here by default. Now, what if we want a different kind of tool, not just this slicer as it is here? Okay. Now we also have this new slicer here. What I want instead is to select the year. Here I can drag, but how about if I want to select the year that I want to apply this to? So let me use this new slicer tool here and also impute the year. So now you see that it gives me this. Now it's subjective. Okay, I'm not going to say there's a right or wrong answer to this. Okay, there's no right or wrong answer. Some persons may prefer this, some persons may prefer this. Okay, it's your call. It's your call. The goal of this session is to basically try to allow you, for you to have a feel to know what to do with the tool. Okay, so if you perhaps you think this is going to be a better suit for your audience, then you can use this. If this is going to be a better one for your audience, you can use this. This allows you to just select, so you can just rather just select. We can perhaps we want to just drag this, if you want to make it more, so for more values to be visible to it, or perhaps while you're editing here, the formatting bit here, you can say, hey, how do you want the slicer settings to be? And you have this select all first selection, but that's not where I'm getting at right now. Okay, things such as this layout here, the maximum rows shown. Okay, so we have 3 shown by default. Perhaps if you want to increase this, to 4 5, bearing in mind that when you do this, you see how it's a bit skewed. So it's it's kind of like you deciding how do you want it to be. So I'm looking at the width. I think I can add an extra column. Okay, and it allows for it accommodates that. Let's see what happens if I add another column. It still accommodates that. It's really giving this grid-like view, like a calendar, but then it's just for years, and you can scroll down, within the period to select what it is that you intend to achieve from all of it. Okay, so now I'm just going to just keep them here. Perhaps I should just drag this. Should I delete this? What do you think? What do you think? What do you think? I'm just going to just leave this here for now. Okay. So now, still flowing with what we have here now with the data set. We're just still trying to just see what we can get from the data set. Now, the Olympics has 2 different kinds of seasons in terms of classification. When we're talking about filters, how you want to set filters to things. Okay, so we have summer Olympics, and then we have the Winter Olympics season in terms of the season. And this currently, at the time of this recording, what we're having is the Summer Olympics. Now, I think having a filter, based on what we've seen with these slices here, to apply filters based on the season would be really, really fantastic. I'm just going to clear selections from this bit here, and tick. Now I've selected another visual here, so I'm just going to just select this same filter, okay, which is a slicer, and instead I'm going to select the season. Okay, so season in here. So we have this category: summer, winter, and if I just select this, you can see the values are changing. Right, winter we have less numbers, summer for winter. Now we're going to touch on this a bit. We're going to touch on this a bit now in terms of like how it appears. Do you want it this way? We have these values that showing here when it's selected, or would you want it to be like, hey, a static view that when you just come in you can just see at a glance, rather than selecting, you're just seeing like in a tabular form, which is where I intend to get to, like, hey, summer Olympics, winter Olympics, what's the count, in terms of total number of athletes that participated, or that were registered for that season. So we can easily convert this, if your visual is selected, we can easily convert this to a table. Okay, so I have table. Now you can see here now the columns are what I have in here. Okay, the columns are what I have in here. Now I wish to have more values in here, things like the ID, the count of my ID. So just dragging it into that bit. So I have the count, right? The count for this and the count for that. I want this. You've seen how we can easily change, to rename for this visual. So I just want this to be, um, let's just say athletes. or should we call, what would you suggest? I'm just going to I'm just going to say leave it account. Okay, and just leave it account. I'm going to leave it account. And now the format you may want to say to apply. I prefer to just have some bit of simple format in terms of thousand separators. So you can easily tell what number we're looking at here. Is it 200? Is it 1,000? Is it 48,000? Do I really have to peer in to know? And I think simple comma separators, go a long way in helping to achieve all of this. So from what we've shared so far, you will know that if we want to apply more formatting, we come in here. Okay, we come in here and we can play with it, the visuals, the general bits. So I'm seeing something here that has values. Okay, so what am I going to say here now? Values. I also have something like saying cell, specific column, cell elements. So now let's just play with values here now. Values is just showing me things for font. Okay, so let's say specific column. What does that have? I don't want to look at season. I want to look at count. And saying things here, display units, value to decimal places, set to auto. I don't need any decimal points for this. I'm just going to 0. Now display units, I can do this here. I think this is a better fit, right? Saying thousands, so you can just say, oh, we have total of 223.49, okay, for the Summer Olympics. This kind of expression. Now, perhaps you even want to apply borders to it. Okay, you want to apply borders to it, you can go ahead to even apply borders to it. If you want to leave this set as this, okay, now because of what we have done, you can see that we now have that comma separator, which is like a main area for me, like a main area of interest for me. Now, where do I wish to have this place? I think it would be nice to have this place just somewhere here, right? Somewhere here would be a good fit. Okay, somewhere here would be a good fit. Now, another thing I'd like to just quickly add, something I'd like to just quickly add is that I had mentioned earlier that try to, well, I use the word borrow, from different knowledge experts from different domains. Why am I saying that is in terms of design, you should not just get stuck in saying like, hey, I'm preparing a dashboard, I'm preparing a report. There are some things that cuts across fields, things like design rules. So you try to get yourself abreast with what's the current current accepted way of designing a thing. Basically a thing. Why I'm saying a thing is I don't think it's restricted. How you design a dashboard, if you try to think about it holistically, it's not so far away from how someone would even design a dress. A fashion designer. You look at some things just have like a basic color, and then there are patterns to it. Some could just have maybe a design. They just put something at the top left or bottom right. There's a reason why they do certain things certain ways to perhaps get your attention to focus on that, or the person is really trying to be subtle on something. So it's good to really get yourself abreast to what is currently acceptable or obtainable in the design space. You're lucky to have friends or colleagues operate in these spaces. You should just try to like know what's obtainable. Things like colors. What colors are acceptable. So if perhaps you're doing this to a certain audience, you just try to investigate, oh, what colors would be best to this audience, or what colors could provoke a wrong emotion or reaction, to that particular audience. By the way, okay, so we have this table here. So like I said, this is just playing around these filters for the year. Now, if you observe anything we select here, you see that the values are changing, right? The values are changing. The values are changing in the card. The values are changing on this table here. Whatever we select, the values are changing. The values are changing. Typically, if we also use this particular or slicer in terms of sliding it, okay, for the timelines, for the timelines, we see that the values are also changing for the cards and for the tables. Now, there are certain times where you do not want something that is happening here in terms of the filters to affect the output here. You don't want it to be dynamic, you want it static. So currently, I with what we have here, I haven't seen a need for that, but it doesn't mean that it won't rise. So, but what happens where you feel like, hey, irrespective of the slicer, the way the slicer is applied, there are certain things that I just want to be static. Okay, perhaps I want it to be on record that from 1896 to 2016, we've had a total of 271,000 plus athletes. Okay, perhaps you don't want that to change. Okay, what you can do is, if you select that visual, you can do this here now. You select this your slicer visual here. So you have these options of things of like filters and slicers affecting this visual. There aren't any filters and slicers applied right now. Now, if I come to the bit of the data drill down, okay, you say project by default say apply drill down filter. So it's the entire page I selected. Can you see this? The entire page is selected. But if you want to be specific to say, hey, I don't want it to affect everyone, so I'm going to click on this here now, right? Let's just say I'm starting to work on this with the start time and all. This is being affected, but say I want to just keep it frozen. Say, hey, you know what? Don't get to anyone. Just be the way you are. What am I supposed to do? Let's just reset this. Okay. Sorry. Just clear this bit here. Send it out. Okay, so we have this here. So now with this, I can come in to say this slicer is selected. I don't want it to be on everyone. I can edit the interactions. So with this clicked on here now, other visual elements have these two common display, right? All of them, they have these two common display. This one here by default, when it's filter, it means that whatever you select here is going to affect the outcome here. If you do not want a change here to be affected here, all you need to do is just click on this bit here that says none. It's kind of like a restriction. So if I just select none for this bit, just this card, I'm just going to select none for this card. Okay, and I say okay. Now I'm going to select a different year here. I'm going to select a different here from this. I'm going to adjust this. What I want you to focus on is this card and this table that we have here. Okay, so I'm just going to do this now. Let's drag this. Observe that the value for the card is unchanged, but the table is changed. Let's even try to make this time to filter it further down. Table values are changing, but this card, it's not changing. So the outcome, the value of the card now at static point to say like, hey, you're not influenced by this particular slicer behavior here. Okay, I hope that's clear. I'm going to post now to someone raising up a question. Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Golden. Thanks for that. Thank you for the support. Okay, so progressing. I'm just going to to just do it as well. That's what I want. Let's see that. Yep. So that works. Now, what else can we also, apply to this? Now, looking at this in terms of the seasons, yeah. Now, that's one distinction. We also have this in terms of sex. We have gender. Okay. So, what are the genders? The genders. When the genders here now, we have this season count. Now, let's just select this. So we have sex, and by default, we have this table table visual all selected. So we have the sex, F and M, to F for female, M for male. Now we want the values in terms of like, oh, what's the level of participation to read. So we can just drag the ID columns in there so we can see what's going on, in terms of how they fed. You can easily express this, perhaps you want to express this with a different visual tool, in terms of performance. There are a couple of them. I wouldn't be in a hurry to say there's a right or wrong. Okay, using this. Okay, so I'm just going to go with a stacked one, and so a stacked chart. So I have for the x-axis, the y-axis. Let's just knock this off and try to just increase this a bit. So I'm just trying to increase the size of this. So I want to play with the gender, the statistics in terms of the gender. Okay, so I can use either or any of the charts. There's no particularly wrong or right answer, but they are preferred, in terms of advice. Oh, this is what I think you should use. Okay, so you can use this. You can use this. I'm going to, well, I want to play with the bar charts. Okay, I want to play with the bar charts. Yeah, so I'm going to go with this gender, the sex. So we have our y-axis and we have our x-axis, and we typically can tell what that entails in terms of the y and then the x. So the y vertical, the x, sorry, the y, and then the x-axis, x and y-axis. So now in terms of the values that we're imputing in there. Okay, so what are the values that we want to impute in there? I'm going to just play with this a little and play with this a little. So yes, so I have that, and I also want the count of the IDs to be thrown in here. Okay, so look at that, count of the IDs to be thrown in there, and I want the values to have I want the values to, let's just drag this off. Let's just drag this here and see what happens. Oh, sorry about that. Drag the text disparity here. So just without using the numbers, just visually looking at it, you can see like, hey, at a glance, right? At a glance, we can see that the males outnumber the females in terms of participation. So remember what we said when we started. You're trying to prepare something for an intended audience. So you already know your audience, and you're asking yourself those important questions. What is important for my audience? What do I think my audience needs to see? Okay, so uh, perhaps you're trying to speak to young females, teenagers who are not so interested in sports but have some good abilities, and you want to encourage them, to step up, to be more, like to come up, like be bold and things around that. So you may want, so for such persons, perhaps you may want to show like, hey, look at the disparity, or perhaps you're taking this to government officials, or people who are responsible for debating policies, giving assent to bills being passed, and you're trying to make a point, with the data that you have from the Olympics to say like, hey, I feel that the females have been marginalized based on disparity, between the male and the female in terms of participation. Is it that, so from here on now, you may want to like ask questions, or you're trying to use the data to push for certain questions to say why, I think just visually looking at it, like why does this disparity seem to exist? Is it that you have more games that you are suited to males? You know, different questions, but all of this, it's based on how you've presented the data. Okay, now just putting it as a table. For instance, we have this table here based on the season. The types of the season, summer and winter games. Looking at this here, we have to actually look at like, oh, we have 220 something thousand. We have helps you to just see it easily, and you're able to just express yourself better. Okay. I think we've exceeded the time that we allocated for this particular session. So I'm just going to pause on this, allow you to ingest this, and in our next live session, which will be communicated, we are going to continue from this point and try to build up on this. Thank you again for tuning in, and I really appreciate you for your patience despite the initial setbacks. Thank you for staying in, and can't wait to have you again. Bye for now.